YouTube, what the crap's going on? HeirofCarthage here, and I'm going to be back with some more Pirates and Raiders action online. This time it's going to be myself as the Getae taking on Macedon against Merc. And Merc was apparently a viewer of mine as well. And he brought a heavy Macedonian army, and I brought kind of an interesting army with the Getae. I thought it was interesting. I brought 5 horse archers, which is quite a few, but I didn't bring any foot skirmishers. So in order to kind of counterbalance that, so I've got 5 horse archers, 6 armored spearmen. And the armored spearmen have a really nice armor value and defense value. They don't have a real high attack, but I figured I would be up against either thorax swords or pikemen, or some combination of the two. And I figured that these guys would do what I needed them to do. I've got a noble spear for a general, and I brought all these heavy spearmen with high defense and armor because that way the pikes wouldn't kill them too quickly if it came into a temporary engagement. I've got 2 noble horsemen backed up by 4 spear horsemen. Spear horsemen are a medium to light cav. And then noble horsemen are a heavy shot cavalry. These guys can be quite useful. They are hard to use. Shot cavalry requires some special attention. It is a deadly variety of cav still, but again requires special attention in today's state of the game. And then I've got 5 of these bow horsemen, and I've got them already set to heavy shot. And what I'm going to do with my bow horsemen, and let's take a look at my opponent's build, because this is going to drive the way I play. So the one thing that would have completely screwed me with this build would have been a pike box with slingers. But Dacia, or the Getae, for instance, in this case, aren't really known like the nomadic factions, but that's one thing you need to be aware of when you're playing as a pike faction. The Getae can play kind of like a nomadic faction. Of course, their cavalry is weaker, and they have access to infantry, which means they have a little more flexibility, but they can bring a lot of horse archers like I have. And to be honest, slingers are the best counter to horse archers. They fire fast, they have a nice arc of fire, and they're deadly to horse archers. So my opponent has brought Peltist instead, though, which is an interesting choice. Not sure why he brought Peltist. Maybe he was expecting a heavy infantry engagement here. He's got 2 Aspis cav and a Thessalian cav there. So that's, and his general is in a Royal Peltist. So see, he's got a Royal Peltist, or 2 Royal Peltist. Let's see, 3 Thorax Pikemen and a Foot Companion. And then he's got a Militia Hoplite unit here. So he's got fairly elite infantry, and even in a rear engagement, it's going to take my Spearmen a while to mop up these Thorax Pikemen, which means that if I can't get rid of his cavalry, I'm in trouble, because right now his cavalry is superior to my own, even though they're fewer in number. So that's where the focus of my, my bow horseman is going to be. It's going to be for chewing up his Aspis Companion cav and his Thessalian cav. And these guys will be a little easier for me to kill because they have a lower armor and a lower armor value and no shield. So you're going to see me picking hits off on them, but they are a little faster probably than the Aspis cav. Maybe not, though. I'm not sure. So I'm going to keep my cavalry around to do some harassment on the enemy, but I've got a lot to mind because look, I've got my opponent surrounded. That's going to be part of my strategy here, is to surround my opponent so that I can look for openings with my cav to get at his skirmishers. And right here I make a micro mistake. He starts hurling javelins at my noble horseman, which this is great for him, bad for me, and he even has his Aspis cav and his Thessalians closing in on me. And my micromanagement was elsewhere with my bow horseman, and you're going to see me just get absolutely wasted on right here. I do manage to save my noble horseman, but my spear horsemen are goners. They're just going to get absolutely destroyed. So great job on my opponent's part to capitalize on a micro mistake by me, but I'm going to go ahead and protect my noble horsemen, and I'll do what I can in the meantime to make up for this. His Peltist here actually get a throw on my bow horseman, so another mistake on my part. So I'm going to get them out of there, but I am going to try and get my bow horseman in for some shots to hopefully gain some ground, and I'll continue my surrounding maneuver. Here I took some spear horsemen in and tore up a couple of his Peltist, but it wasn't really a great trade. I didn't kill any of his Peltist units, I just damaged them. One of them by about 30 some odd percent and the other by 20 some odd percent, so I got probably 57 kills in the spear horseman. It's a pretty cheap unit, but I don't know if I'd call that cost effective because his units are still there. So far my opponent's doing a good job of beating me back. So I'm going to have to reevaluate and go back to the plan, basically. So I'm going to get myself back on plan here, keep myself safe from stuff like this. You can see he's actually trying to charge me with the Militia Hoplite here and his Royal Peltist General. and once again catches me a little bit slow on micro, but again, at this point I'm starting to hopefully pick up the pace and get my game on. But so far my opponent's done a pretty good job. The problem is he has no answer to my bow cav. If he would have brought his own archers, even cheap archers, and slingers, he would have been in better shape. In fact, just a few units of cheap slingers could have completely changed the way this battle was handled, because they would have been extremely deadly to my cavalrymen. And that would have forced me to have to find some way to engage around his phalanx, which would have been difficult. But yeah, I'm luring off his Aspis cav, getting lots of good heavy shot. But, I mean, the skirmish function on Rome 2 is a bit tricky, and my opponent is out here just probing it, basically, clicking attack orders in different directions, and his Aspis cav are very nearly catching my bow horsemen, and right here they do. This unit was on skirmish, but I had to force a manual order, and by the time I did, though, his Aspis cav are getting kind of a charge speed boost. You know, your unit gets kind of a speed boost at the last second coming in on a charge, and he got a ton of kills on my unit right there. This Aspis cav, however, though, took a lot of damage. He is trying to keep it within safety range of this peltist, and I can't charge them into melee because then he'd be able to reinforce with his Aspis cav. But now these guys are singled out, and this is what I wanted. Now they're away from support from the other parts of his army, which means that my bow horsemen can follow him and continue to fire and get kills. And so I'll whittle down these Aspis cav. So now my plan is kind of coming to fruition. And even though that's the case, there's still a lot of work to be done. He's still got 2 Royal Peltists to protect his flanks, and to be quite honest, this is a great unit to protect his flank in this case, because it can easily destroy my spearmen without too much contest. Now, if he would have brought like hoplites or something else to protect his flank, they would have had a good time holding my spearmen, but not an easy time killing my spearmen. So this Royal Peltist is going to be an effective unit to keep see how he can keep me from being able to outflank his phalanx. He just presents this Royal Peltist, and there's nothing I can do about it at the moment because my bow cavalry are busy taking down his own cavalry. And I did manage to destroy 1 Aspis cav. I went ahead and turned my guys off fire at will as soon as I got a chance, because there's still 1 cavalryman running away, but my men are still firing. Maybe I just now took them off. And then I have the rest of his cav following me over here. I go ahead and decide to turn around and take the charge of his Aspis cav, and then take the charge of his Thessalian cav here, because now my bow horsemen can come in and take out this Peltist unit that's now exposed. So this will be a great trade for me. My noble horsemen will be able to finish off his Thessalians and probably finish off his Aspis cav as well, but I'm going to need to take out these Peltists because they were throwing javelins in and getting some good kills on me. So yeah, you're going to see me take my bow horsemen, try and get around this militia hoplite, which looks like they are going to manage to catch me, but you're going to see me just keep running away from them. Just going to mostly ignore them and run down this Peltist. So the militia hoplite kind of catches me, but you're able to see that I can kind of just skirt the spear unit, and now they won't be able to catch me, and his Aspis cav is destroyed. So at this point, my opponent has no more cavalry, which means now this is the time for me to do stuff like this. His mercenary Thracian Peltists were exposed to a charge from my noble horsemen, and now there's no protection for these Peltists, so now I can run off his skirmishers. So at this point, my opponent has no protection from my infantry due to his skirmishers, but he does still have some very elite infantry here, and some very capable infantry. This Royal Peltist is chasing me, and Heir is doing the honorable thing here and running, because this is not what I want. I really don't want to engage this Royal Peltist, but I do have to stop it because it's chasing me, and so I'll go ahead and outflank it and see what I can do, but this is a bad engagement. These Royal Peltists are going to excel in that fight. And now my bow cavalry can get free of his militia hoplites and come to assist, and it's just a matter of trying to surround his pike infantry. So here I'm going to take a rear charge in with my armored spearmen. My armored spearmen are taking a beating from his Royal Peltist. And even with this unit surrounded, those Royal Peltists are going to be pretty effective. I now need to begin surrounding his pike units. I did get into the back of this one, but he's turned to face me. And basically, I'm just going to continue to maneuver, and I'm going to have to keep running from his Royal Peltist at the moment. Because again, those guys were an excellent choice on my opponent's part. But you can see that I have his pike lines entirely broken up. And these high armored units, again, look, only 2 kills on the front of his pikes right now, because it takes a long time for these guys to get killed. And to be honest, his pikes would be more effective if they were in a little bit deeper ranks, be more maneuverable. And you can see that these pikemen were moving, and I charged them. Here I get a better charge into the flank, and I'm going to come from behind these guys with my horsemen. He does try and turn around, though, and get my horsemen. That is a foot companion unit. It's going to be extraordinarily difficult to break. And then out here, his royal peltist did catch up with my armored spearmen, but now my horse archers can come to bear. This is going to be my best way at getting rid of a royal peltist in this particular fight, is using heavy shot. And I'm going to fire from straight behind the royal peltist. And these poor guys are so good at an infantry fight. You can see they mopped up my spears in no time with almost no losses. But now they're going to get picked to pieces by mobile bow horsemen. And all the while, I'm still just kind of breaking up the infantry fight here and taking rear charges with my remaining cavalry where I can. You can see his foot companions starting to take losses, and his pikemen are getting outflanked. And every time he moves to change formation, I simply come from another direction. So I've got noble spears on both sides of that thorax pikeman, or a noble spear and an armored spear. His royal peltists are still alive over here, and this royal peltist unit is just getting picked apart by my bow horsemen. But again, I think my opponent overall is doing a pretty good job. He knows what it is that he's needed to do here. It was going to be hard for him, honestly, to go against my bow cavalry, but I think he's done a pretty good job so far. And his infantry is doing its best, but again, you can see here, giving attack orders and stuff with pikes is usually the wrong way to go. I don't know if that's what he did. He should be reforming these guys, just entirely reforming them, because look, it's easy for me to get behind him and then just pull out. Like, so I was engaged with the front here, but I can pull out. He's putting in a flanking maneuver here, and he's bringing in his royal peltist, but his royal peltist are taking an absorbent amount of bow fire, and they're now down to 29 men. And that is my general. It's an armored spear unit, which means it has, you can see the melee defense and armor keeps it alive for a long time, even in a disadvantageous situation. This foot companion's still alive, even though it's outflanked. These guys are hard to kill. Definitely don't want to take them from the front. So look, I can just disengage. So see, my opponent did a great job here at boxing me. He boxed me in, but then I can just use the mobility, disengage, and come around, because pikes can't keep you engaged. And I can now come in from other angles, and then my bow horsemen can keep firing from behind. So you're just constantly shifting in order to outflank pikes. And you can see that these pikes, again, they're not dying easy. These guys have 65 kills. They're getting kills. It's just that eventually them not being able to face all the, not being able to protect from the front and rear is going to be their weakness. They're definitely strong units. And see this reforming bug that still occurs. These guys get into some kind of weird porcupine formation, and I'm going to take advantage of that and get my men into them. But he's clicking attack orders, I believe, rather than reforming, but it could be a reforming error. Once he loses this foot companion, it's going to hurt the morale of his men, because that was an aura unit, and his general's gone. And you can see that when it breaks, that thorax pikeman breaks, and then this thorax pikeman breaks. So a very tough fight. And to be honest, my opponent didn't bring the right tools, I don't think, to deal with the build that I brought. If he would have brought slingers, I think this would have been an easy victory for my opponent. And if you look at his pikemen there, one of his thorax pikemen did alright, all things considered. It was getting a fair number of kills. This royal peltist did good. This one did good. But the problem is they got eventually picked apart. I think he did a great job at bringing these royal peltists to flanking units. However, I think the one thing that he could change, and let's go take a look in a minute to be sure, is whether or not he should have brought thorax swordsmen instead of royal peltist, because they're cheaper. He could have brought 2 of them for the same price, basically. But we'll go see here in a minute. His Aspis Campan and Thessalians weren't able to get the kills, and then, of course, his skirmishers weren't able to get enough kills either. His infantry was tough for me to break, but I was able to do it through continual movement there. So, yeah, you can see the kills on my units here. My bow horsemen, of course, paying off the way I wanted them to. Let's go in here and take a look at a few things. So, if we pull up the Getae, which is who I was playing as, heavy infantry-wise, the best I could have offered was mercenary axe warriors and noble swords. Noble swords. Now, noble swords are more than capable of taking down a thorax swordsman. I doubt these axe warriors could. It's possible they could, but I doubt it, because they're not a formation attack unit. They do have great armor piercing, but I'm thinking a thorax swordsman on both of his flanks would have been a more effective flank protector. Again, I very much agree with his mentality of bringing those sword units on his flanks. I think a sword unit makes an excellent flanking component to a pike army, because the swords are harder for enemy infantry to outflank, and then you can get your pikes to try and help protect your skirmishers still. Because, to be honest, in today's world of Rome 2, protecting your skirmishers with spearmen is extremely difficult. Barbarian spearmen are probably better at it than, say, like hoplites and other stuff, even though the hoplites are heavier, because people will just charge your spear unit with a melee cav and then just charge straight on through because of the ability to pull through. Now, they will take losses, but the losses aren't as ferocious as they would be in, say, like Shogun 2, and so that's what people will do nowadays. I've actually seen a lot of people running Roman armies right now with elite infantry, and the idea is, hey, they bring a ton of elite infantry in case you decide to, say, pick like the Odrysian kingdom or something, and you bring a whole bunch of Thracian nobles, which seems like, I can cut down Roman infantry, no problem. Well, what they'll do is they'll just bring Praetorian Cav and Legionary Cav, which are both fairly well armored, and they'll charge their heavy infantry forward, go ahead and go with you on the charge, and then they'll just pull through your spears or your own cavalry to get your skirmishers. And because Thracian nobles are so expensive, they can counterbalance that with Evocati cohort, which are a great deal cheaper. And even though the Evocati cohort will get killed by a Thracian noble, they can bring more of them than you can Thracian nobles, and it ends up balancing out and they can win because they're able to just pull through your own cavalry or your own spearmen. And then, of course, they can always pop a Draco on those, and it screws up the bonus versus cavalry from your spear unit. So Rome is actually still very good against Odrysian Kingdom, in my opinion, because the Odrysian Kingdom is going to have a very hard time stopping Roman cavalry. You can bring spears if you want, like I said, but it's still a hard counter because the Romans do have that Draco ability, which really helps their cavalry, and they're able to pull through your spearmen, get to the back of your line, get to your infantry, basically. Also, Thracian, the armored, Thracian nobles are somewhat vulnerable to cav charges from the front. So I still think Rome is an extremely powerful faction right now, extremely powerful because of their infantry. The Thracians, though, are good. The Thracian factions are pretty fun to use. The one Balkan faction that I haven't showed you yet is the RDI, and these guys are not very good. They're pretty crappy, and they're very hard to use because they're spear heavy, and again, right now, spears are weak to the fact that they can get pulled through by cavalry. These guys are pretty good. The Illyrian Noble Hoplites are a fairly tough unit, and you have these Illyrian Hoplites too. Both of them have the Expert Charge defense, which makes them a pretty fair unit for their price. The problem is that the only spearmen that have counter-cavalry tactics, well, there's a couple of them that do, but these Illyrian Thurio spears, these are the guys that you would need to use to actually counter cavalry, whereas these guys would have to be more like your mainline infantry. And you're going to need to rely on skirmishers like these cheap slave javelinmen, but the problem is, again, their cavalry stinks. The enemy's just going to pull through your spears, go straight to your slave javelinmen, and then your infantry is going to be incapable of cutting down his in a melee. So when you're playing as RDI, you got to make sure to bring Illyrian Raiders or Mercenary Axe Warriors to try and help you win an infantry engagement. It's going to be a very big challenge because your cavalry is so weak. RDAI are a very fragile faction, but they're an interesting faction because I like some of their units. They provide an interesting ability, and to be honest, in a 2v2, some of these units might be very interesting to see how they play out. If you team up with someone who's got heavy infantry that's good at countering infantry, these guys would be a great spear faction. So if there's a faction that has good infantry and cav, combine it with a good spear faction here, could be an interesting combination. The RDAI, though, really needs some help in the skirmishing department. They've got some weak skirmishers and very little way to protect them, because heavy infantry can cut through yours and get to your, and if not, the cavalry is just going to pull through. It's very hard to win a fight as RDAI against someone who's determined to pull through. It just really is. But in any case, I will bring you more episodes soon, trying to explain more about these DLC. I do think it adds an interesting component to the game. Out of the DLCs released so far, obviously I like Hannibal at the Gates because it helped Carthage, but this is a very interesting one, and I actually really like the factions they added, and I like the mechanics that they add to I like the subtleties that they add to the game with these factions, so I'm enjoying it a lot. Hope you all enjoy it too. HeirofCarthage signing off for now.